2, 3.
Welcome to Pydaxiology, Conversations on the Value of Children.
Amber Dahl, it is so wonderful to meet you. And if I'm not mistaken, I met your daughter-in-law.
You did.
Is that right?
She was so
All right.
excited. Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. What she wanted for her birthday was your book. And I don't always give gifts to my children that are gone from home, but we happened to all be together, and we had like 4 birthdays in a row. And so we had a big birthday celebration. And so when you came to speak at her university, she just couldn't wait to try to get down there and have you sign her book. And so that was the meeting. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, she wrote to me in advance, and it was a very sweet note. And I thought, okay, there's going to be 5,000 or 10,000 people in there. I don't know how we're going to meet each other. So I just told her, well, this is where I'll be, and, try to fight your way through. But there she was, and it was really lovely. So it was a very quick meeting. But then she wrote to me afterwards and suggested that at some point I connect with you. So here you are right at the very beginning of this new podcast where we are just sort of, the goal here is to continue those conversations we had in the book and just talk with moms all over the country. And who knows, maybe we'll talk with moms other places in the world who have really wonderful stories to tell us about their children and what they mean to them and kind of how they got started having kids and what their story is. So with that, where do you want to begin? I like to sometimes ask, where did you meet your spouse and when was that? So if that seems like a good place to start, you can start there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, so my husband and I both started college right after graduation this summer. And so we were just weeks from high school graduation. I was 17, he was 18. And we met actually playing volleyball on sand courts by the dorms. And, It was a pretty powerful moment for me in particular. He was handsome and fun and humble, and I just really didn't see that combination very often. And as we were playing, one of the guys kind of insulted someone who had missed the ball. And my husband, Jeff, spoke up and he said, "Hey, let's be nice to each other." And I thought that was pretty fantastic for him in this group of strangers, kids his own age, to be able to to stand up for just that kindness. And so I just was interested right away. And we started dating a little bit later, and then for a few months. And then he left to serve a mission for 2 years in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania.
Wow.
And so, there wasn't really email back then. And so we communicated by airmail and for during those years. And I dated while he was gone, but he was just my very favorite. And when he came home, we reconnected.
That's great. So how old were you when you reconnected and you got engaged soon or?
Yeah, pretty soon. He came home, let's see, and I was 20. So, 20. And we were talking in his kitchen one day after he had come home, and he said, "Let's get married." And we laughed, or I laughed, like we had often done. We'd often kind of said that in just fun, and he wasn't laughing. And I asked him if he was serious, and he was. And so a few weeks later, we got engaged and married a few months after that.
That's great. So you were 20, and how old was he?
21.
21. That's wonderful. That's great. So, and did you talk about children at that time? Did you already know you wanted to have a lot of children?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a big family. I have 9 siblings, and he had 4 siblings, so big families. And I had a picture of my whole family because I was away at college, and he used to memorize their names.
Okay.
And he just thought it was so fun that we had this big family. And he also just really enjoyed having, lots of kids around. And so I think we always knew we wanted to have a big family. Yeah. It was a important and happy part of our lives.
Yeah. And where were you in school? Maybe you said so already.
We went to school in Utah. We met there.
You were, okay.
hmm
And did you end up walking away or did you finish?
I did finish with two
Okay.
babies.
Wow. Okay. That's so great. I think it's really important to kind of renormalize that you can be in school with children and that, like life doesn't have to be on hold when you're in college, especially in relation to marriage. So
Yeah.
that's really special. Did the university or college, did it do anything special? Did you have to find special housing? What did you do?
We went to BYU and they have a
Okay.
pretty good married student housing. And
Yeah.
so we lived there. We lived in a few different places, but that was one place. And, I remember walking around campus pregnant with my first or my second, which I did both times, and having professors approach me and tell me that I was doing just exactly the right thing. And it mattered a lot that they
does.
encouraged me
Yeah.
and said, well, it's not going to be easier later. This is the right time. And I thought, okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So it was helpful.
Yeah. That's really great. So tell me about your babies. I don't know anything about your family yet. So how many do you have? And then take me back to having your first in college.
Yeah, yeah. I have 7 children. Our oldest is 28 and
Okay.
our youngest is 13.
Okay.
And our first, we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I only mention that because it gives some context to kind of how we began things. So I believe that we lived as spirits together before we came to this earth and received bodies. And I think, that lends a lot of importance to the process of welcoming children into your family. And
Yeah.
we really felt like entering into a covenant marriage really meant also welcoming children. And so we were anticipating the birth of our first baby before we even got married. That was always the plan. And so we even planned it all out. So we were going to get married so that, at a time so that I could get pregnant right away and have that baby and still graduate. Like all of that timing was all going to be perfect. And of course, it didn't turn out that way. And we did have a baby in our first year of marriage, but graduation waited a little bit longer.
Okay. All right. In what month did you get married?
We got married in August, and then our
Okay.
baby was
And
born in July.
that's great. You're similar. We got married in August and our first baby came in May. So close that I think some of the kids were, the kids in the neighborhood and we kind of, there were eyebrows raised. But, say like, guys, well, it's not 9 months, it's 40 weeks, so it's sort of like sometimes, but that was a really great blessing. And then also I was thinking your children, you said, I think from 27 down to 13. So mine range from 25 down to 9. So like we're pretty close.
Yeah,
for-
like twinners.
That's
Yeah.
that's great. And that must mean we didn't get married too far apart. So I was late 90s and you must have been 96, 97?
Yeah, 97 we got married.
Okay. That's really great. Wonderful. And so who was your first?
Our
Who's your first baby?
oldest was a boy, Dallin, and I don't know if you want to know about him like in
Yes,
his
I
life
do.
today or you want to know back
Yeah.
then.
Well, I certainly am thinking like what was it? What was so you were anticipating him and hoping that God would bless you with him before you got married. But I was thinking like, yeah, what was it like? I know I have vivid memories of all of my births and my babies when they came, but the first one is just, it's such a big change. So, what was that like? And it was in the middle between, I guess, 2 years of school for you.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, sure. Tell me what he's up to now.
Yeah. Well, he's actually the husband of that cute girl that came and met you. So
okay. Oh, that's so great.
that is pretty
Okay.
fun. And they're at school with their own 3 babies, and that's pretty
so
fun
great.
to watch them grow and into being parents and to all of that role
Yeah.
leads them to become. And so it's a great
Yeah.
blessing for me. But back then, it was a big change. I remember when I was pregnant with him thinking, how does anybody do this more than one time? I just thought,
Right.
I was sick and I was tired, and the changes in my body were so disorienting, and so that part was challenging. And when he
Yeah.
came, it was so wonderful. It was beautiful. It was exciting. We loved being a family of three, and I think those discomforts fade pretty quickly, and your body goes back to normal. You sleep, at least
Yeah.
eventually.
So you were 21 or 22 when he came?
21.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then how old was he when he got married?
He was 20.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So was he your first to get married?
No, he was my second.
No.
My daughter, who's just younger, got married first.
Okay. That's funny. So me too. My third son got married before my eldest
Yeah.
son, but the two of them are both married. So, okay. So I'm going to go right there. How old were you when you became a grandma?
Gosh, I didn't really calculate that out. So my oldest granddaughter's 5, and I
Okay.
am 49. So
Okay.
44.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I can do the math.
That's I know, right? I mean, we could just have the listeners, try to work it out for themselves. But why am I asking that? Well, in a sense, because I think that's part of the curiosity of the way that we have lived our lives and chosen to live our lives is for a lot of people, they just don't, they can't picture what it would be like to be, I mean, I know many people having their last baby at 44, and to be a grandma already at 44 is wonderful. Of course, I don't associate anything negative with being a grandma. I don't associate even being old with being a grandma. To me, it's just like kind of an extension of your motherhood. And so just, at least that's how I experience it. And, I just want them all to live on my street. And just, it's like, of course they don't, not any one of them lives on my street. But I think part of that for me, and I don't know what your experience was just, again, just to give the background here, I had my dad's family is a little bit, I'd say, like, it was disrupted. There were divorces and remarriages, and wasn't really healthy in every respect. But he, at one point, his stepfather remarried, after his own mother passed away. And this lady felt that she was too young to be called a grandma. So she asked us to call her an aunt. And I think I see that a lot. I see that people feel too young to be grandma when they look for these other words. Everybody's got different language. Like, what are your grandkids going to call you? I was like, grandma. I think grandma works. That's what it is.
Pretty easy.
But yeah, but I think part of it for me, and this would not be a universal experience, but it's just as I'm thinking through the life I've lived, is that when I married my husband, who was a widower, we came home from our honeymoon, and there was a whole bunch of people calling me mom, and I didn't feel old enough to be anybody's mom, and so there was a kind of process of understanding, well, family is a reality based on marriage. And so I had to live this idea that sort of, okay, I don't feel like her mom or his mom, but his mom and her mom passed away, and I'm all that they have, and I'm married forever to the dad. And so that's my role. My role is mom. So that was an education for me. I feel I was quite humbled by it in a sense. And so we learned, all of us together, that kind of the reality of family can work its way into your heart quite apart from how you feel on any given day. So I really learned a lot from that. And then when these, say, like, early teenage children grew up, they got married much younger than my own children, who I gave birth to, in the next couple of years. So already in my 30s, some of these, sort of adopted children got married and had children. So I was already sort of in that, like, what are they going to call you? And I thought, well, I'm not going to make up reality. Like, I'm married to their grandfather. I'm happy to be grandma. I'll just step in and be grandma. So, it's been a series of things, and this isn't about my experience, but that gave me a lot of reason to think what's most important, right? It's not sort of like feeling old or young, but actually just who's going to play this role. And of course, for me as a grandma, one of the ways that I thought about stepping into that role was not just, well, these are, here's this child who's your grandchild, but actually, like, what's my relationship to this child's mother or father who is my child? And now looking after my child as a parent, and kind of like that to me was so charming and so wonderful.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've seen the same thing now with my biological children as they've become parents. Kind of like, oh, what does Greg need as a dad? Greg is a dad now. He's my baby, but he's a dad. And so, it's, of course, I want to spoil the grandchildren in their own way, but I also want to not forget to take care of the children now as parents,
Yeah.
So like they're preparing Christmas, say, for their children. Well, we don't want to forget the dad, so who's going to take care of Greg? He still wants to feel cared for. So anyway, it's been a real privilege, but yeah, I think young grandmas, we need to just embrace the role.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think, it's such a blessing to be involved in these little children's lives in such a important way
Yeah.
that I want
Yeah.
to, I want to be the grandma. I love that. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's a gift.
Exactly. Well, can you just out, it doesn't have to take forever, but just outline for us like how you went from your first to your seventh, like kind of how many years between them and what did that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I remember, I don't know if you want lessons along the way. I can share a few, but
Yes, of course.
But, with our first, and I was in school and I was a mom and I was studying business. And so I was with a lot of men and it just felt like I was in two worlds, not that women and men don't, coexist well, but I just felt like my life at home was so different than my life at school. But one thing I really learned in those first year or so is just priorities. I can think of a few times when I had a test and my baby was sick. And it was like this very clear, you can't do both. You can't study and hold that baby. And I just had to really consciously decide I'm going to hold that baby. And I was going to trust God that he was going to help me with the other part of my life. And I think that was very refining for me to embrace that as a priority in my life, and then learn to plan ahead so that I was prepared when those things inevitably came up. And so, that was some of that with our first. And then we had some friends that had 3 kids in college, and we just thought that was pretty amazing. And so we went to visit with them when we were kind of thinking about having another one, and they just encouraged us and told us that we could do it, and that was really helpful. And so when I felt strong physically and emotionally, then we decided to have another one, and our daughter was born just almost 2 years after our son.
Okay.
And so she is the one that got married first. Her name is Haven.
Okay.
She lives in the Seattle area with her husband, and they have 3 children with 1 on the way.
Okay. That's great.
It's been fun. And so anyway, then she actually came very fast. She was a really fast labor, and we moved 5 days after she was born. We had graduated, and we moved to Boise, Idaho, where my husband's job was. And when we moved there, they were building a hospital that was not too far from our house. And with that fast labor, I thought, I'm going to wait till this hospital is built before I have another baby.
Okay.
And it didn't take too long. And we had our third, Harrison, when it was, they were our closest two. They're 21 months apart, those two. And then we went on a camping trip. And on the way home, we just chatted about, our lives and our things we had learned. And we talked about how we thought we had really learned a few things, then we had gained some skills, and that we were really becoming good parents. And so we thought we should really put those skills to use and have another baby. And I think Heavenly Father knew we had some things to learn, maybe about humility, but we came home and prayed that we would have another baby, and I got pregnant pretty quickly. And then at 17 weeks, I went to my appointment, and my doctor was doing an ultrasound, and she showed me the baby's body up to the head, but the very quiet area where the heartbeat should have been. And she said, Amber, I'm so sorry. This doesn't look good, but there's more. And so she showed me another body, also with a quiet heartbeat. And we found that we had been expecting conjoined twins, but they had passed away.
Oh.
And that was a real turning point for our family. We went, to the hospital together, my husband and I, and went through that beautiful and difficult experience to give birth to these babies who were alive. And it was one of the sweetest experiences of my life to be with my husband in that way, to have his support and his just to be united through that. And the reason why it was a turning point is that I went home afterwards, and I had the hospital had given us literature about grieving so that we could be well informed. And one of the things that it's encouraged us to do is to name the babies, to have the other children make gifts for the babies, all of these things. And so I started to think about names for these babies. And immediately I was surprised by this really bad feeling. And the suddenness of that feeling really caught my attention. And so I knelt down to pray, and I asked God if we should not be naming these babies. And he said no, that we should not. And I asked him if the spirits had come to these bodies yet, and he said no, that they had not. And I asked if they would still come to our family, and he said yes, that they would come. And so
Wow.
I haven't had a lot of answers from God in that way, in that very direct, immediate way. But this time I did. I think he just really knew I needed that comfort and guidance. And so through an autopsy, we found that we learned that the babies had been girls. And we believe that gender is eternal. And so I knew we would have 2 girls. And so we just set about bringing them to our family. And so we had our 4th baby, a boy, Max, a year later. So that was 2004.
Okay.
And I think I felt for the first time what a gift children are. Even though I loved these children and I felt like they were blessings, it was a different experience to realize that, it wasn't really up to me, but that God blessed us with gifts of children.
Yeah.
And so let's see. So then I also had some difficulties with my pregnancies. I had some laxity in my pelvis that made it hard to walk and lift my legs when I was pregnant. And so I really had to work hard in between my pregnancies to regain strength. And so I remember talking to a friend at that time and just saying, I don't know, maybe I just got it wrong. This is so hard. And, my body doesn't do this easily. And she said, you are doing the exact right thing. You need to do everything you need to do to welcome those spirits into your family. And I really appreciated her, courage and forthrightness and just, speaking up and encouraging me. And so we had our 5th, another boy.
Okay.
Almost exactly 2 years later. We often celebrated their birthdays together because they're just 2 days apart.
Okay.
And then we, let's see, so same thing. I had a lot of recovery to do. And I remember one day just walking on the treadmill, trying to get strong and feeling a little bit discouraged. And praying as I walked, just asking God, maybe I didn't understand. I've had another boy and had another boy.
Yes.
And you said 2 girls, but I don't know. This is so hard. And so the answer I received was, what was true then is true now. And so I kept going with what I felt was God's approval and encouragement. And so I had another revelatory experience that told me that this was going to be one of those babies, one of those girls. And so we had our sixth, Lydia.
Oh.
And then, like, I'm trying to think, 2.5 years later, we had our seventh, which was Lucy. And she was born at Christmas time, and she's my only one born at that time of year. And it was really a different experience to, be with child when everybody's singing about this mother with child. And that was sweet.
Yes. Oh, that's so wonderful. I was waiting for those two girls. I thought they're coming, right?
They came, yeah.
They're coming. What a story of faith and just promise. And I really loved your reflection on a specific moment when you look back and you see, like, this is when I identified the sense that these children are really blessings and gifts. I had a really strong sense of that with my seventh. And again, you look back and you think, well, of course I appreciated all my children before that. But what you said really resonated with me, because that was a really surprising thing for me, in the sense that I didn't think I could appreciate it more, or I wasn't aware that I had been missing a level of appreciation. And it was really my seventh baby, and it had been the hardest pregnancy I'd had, and brought her home from her christening when we consecrate the baby. And I came home and I just had this very overwhelming sense that I couldn't believe God had entrusted one more baby to us. And, I hadn't thought that way. The pregnancy was so hard. I just wanted to get through it. I wasn't. And then I was really just caught up with this. I thought, wow, like, it's almost breathtaking. And it's a funny thing that it would happen, that you would sense that in a time when it's actually connected to so much hardship. And you would think, well, I think on a human level, without the eyes of faith or a supernatural faith, you would look and you would think, well, the sense of blessing must be connected to, I don't know, an abundance of human goods. Like you'd say, oh, like such a great pregnancy, what a blessing. Of course, a great pregnancy is a blessing. And yet, at least for me, the deepening of my sense that it was a gift always came with harder sacrifices. And I think there's a deep paradox there that is hard to convey if God hasn't offered it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think sometimes that depth of sorrow opens up a space for greater joy. And I've seen that a lot. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Well, on that note, there's a good question I always like to ask, which is, I think a lot of people looking at your life might just wonder, when you think about even just the short sort of summary version you gave us, and of course I have a sense of what living all those years would feel like, but would have a sense that, like, all these sacrifices just eat away at you, or they chip away, or they take something from you. And so, how do you make sense out of the idea that you can be thriving, and here you are thriving, flourishing, a beautiful, happy grandmother, but you can go through that almost like the shadow of the valley of death? And how do you tell the story in your heart?
I was reminded this morning of this beautiful, sweet song. And it says, there's just a couple of lines. It says, God gave us families to help us become what he wants us to be. This is how he shares his love, for the family is of God. And I think that idea that we become something that God wants us to be through becoming parents is really powerful. And it's totally been my experience. I remember in the adjustment to being a mother at first, struggling, feeling like it's very quiet. Nobody is talking to me. I'm home and I'm changing a lot of diapers and I'm doing a lot of feeding and dishes, and it just was a big change. And I felt like that was hard. And there was a moment, not at that same stage, but later on, that I remember doing dishes and thinking, I can either love this or I can hate it, but it's going to be a lot of years. So I should just learn, to love this task, and maybe not love it like in the process, but for what I was creating with it, which was peace and beauty and order, and so it's just a couple of little examples of refinement. And I think when we have children, we are absolutely changed. I don't think we are the same person that we were at the beginning, but it is always happier and holier and better. Like, I think about how much more patient I am and how much more positive and encouraging, and just these attributes that have come as I've been a mom have made me different. And I think that's the plan. I think that's the goal, is for us to grow in these important ways.
Yeah. What about marriage? What's been your experience with marriage and all of your children? I love the story you told about being with your husband when your conjoined twins passed. But what are some other pearls of wisdom about your marriage?
Yeah, I was thinking through some of those changes that came to me as I was, growing into my role as a mother. And, one of those is just increased love. Sometimes you think, I love my husband. There's no way I could love anyone, as much, but you have the baby, and now you have more for that baby. And as each one comes, your capacity to love just is magnified. And that, I think, is kind of miraculous. And as time went on, I felt the same thing with our in-laws and our grandchildren, that we just had these hearts that were growing and being tutored a little bit. Patience, unselfishness, discipline. I had a friend and she was telling a story, and just offhandedly she said, well, I never yell at my children, but da 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 da. And I said, let's go back to what you just said. Did you say you never yell at your children? And she said, well, I'm stern with them sometimes, and I correct them, but I never yell. And I thought, wow, could I be that kind of mom? And it just gave me like this idea that I could be better and that I could grow in that area. And anyway, another milestone was, there was a moment when I felt like I could be the same person at home that I was outside of my home. And I think there was a time as I was growing that I felt like, I could be impatient with my kids at home, or I could be grumpy and be somebody different away from home. But I always felt kind of this discord, that wasn't the ideal. And when I felt like I could be just the one person, it was super important to me. Compassion, in particularly for my children, even when I had my own struggles and my own challenges, that I could unselfishly be compassionate for their struggles. And then the choosing service as a good objective, that service should be like treasured, welcomed. And so the reason I kind of list those out is because when you asked about marriage, if there are two people who are growing in these same ways, who are less selfish, more loving, more compassionate, have greater integrity, that is a better marriage. And I felt that way. I felt like in every way that we've both been refined, our marriage has been blessed and improved.
Hmm. That's a really neat idea. Well, I guess I put it this way. I think people think about a relationship, and it is in its own way, as if it's the space between a couple, right? That there's you and there's your husband, and then the space between you, something, or maybe how the two of you interact. It's almost like it's a third thing. There's you and your husband, and then the relationship. It's got like capital R. But you're almost saying, well, look, there's me and there's my husband, and actually the kind of people we are will influence the space between us, the relationship between us. And I wonder how many people think about that. So I just came across, well, given what I do at the university and what I research, people do send me things a lot. And I just came across an email where someone was aware we're going to begin working with our undergraduates to help them prepare for marriage better. And this one gentleman from Chicago, I think he said, well, this is my list of tips, and I thought, okay, that's right. I put it in my research folder. And he had something in there. He said, you should have the students read and study things like Atomic Habits from James Clear and things in that category. These just, kind of basic, not self-help, we wouldn't call them that, but like, how do you grow in virtue? And his rationale was, if they become more virtuous before they get married, those marriages will be better marriages. And I think people don't think about that very often. They think better, or the qualitative goodness of a marriage is either something they can't control, right? You're just sort of struck with a good marriage, right? Like I know I think my dad said something to this effect before I got married. He said, well, it's kind of, it's just a crapshoot, just see what happens, you don't know. So people think it's like fate or something that just strikes them, where there's a lot that depends upon your level of preparation, but then the kind of person you become, because God willing, you live with your spouse for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you won't be the same person. So you're either getting better or you're getting worse.
Yeah.
And if you're getting better, it stands to reason that your way of living together will improve. And then take all of that, what I just said, and then take your idea that having children makes you better, or is part of that process of gaining human and spiritual virtues. And that's a pretty neat recipe.
Yeah. And I think, looking at it from a marriage perspective, if you are united in your goals, and I would say from a religious perspective, to follow God, if you're united in that, everything else will come,
Yeah. Yeah. Seek first the kingdom. That's really great. What do you do in particular? What are the notes of your marriage? Your kids would say, oh, well, mom and dad always do this. Do you walk together? Do you have date nights? Like, what are the special things that you and your husband do?
Yeah, we had a date usually once a week, and we did that. We've done that always. Even when we had a lot of little kids and money was tight, we just decided that was going to be a priority for us. And so we budgeted for it, and we did our best to get away and to reconnect and talk to each other. I think we always enjoy that. I love to walk, and so when my husband can get away, he'll join me, and we get to walk and talk. Trying to think what else. We love to have a date every night. So we just try to, after the kids go to bed, have some time together, and it's a little easier with fewer kids at home, but not a lot because they're bigger and they stay up later. So
yeah. What's a good stay-at-home date night for you guys?
We just usually watch a show. We used to have like treats, but we're getting older, so we don't do that as much.
I know. It's a little dangerous, that nighttime snacking.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. Now, remind me, so your baby is 13.
Yes.
And so who else do you have at home?
My two daughters are still at home, 16 and 13.
Okay. Is Lucy's birthday coming up?
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
December 19th.
Okay. Now, I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but I don't know if you know this, but the Saint Lucy in the Catholic Church, her feast day is in December. Do you know this?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No. Do you know what day it is?
It's the 13th of
Okay,
December.
very close. That's so sweet.
Yeah. So St. Lucy, she was an early 4th century virgin who was very holy, reputation for holiness. And what is she the patron saint of? The blind, and also anyone with eye disorders of the eye. And I think there's a story that there are many legends of people praying to her, and that she miraculously helped people with eye problems. Anyway,
That's
she's been
beautiful.
around in the Catholic Church for a long
Yeah.
time. So as soon as you said Lucy was born in December, I thought, oh, that's really interesting. But yeah, I love St. Lucy. It's such a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Lucia Light, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really great. Well, thank you for telling us about your marriage a little bit. What does your husband do?
He is a software engineer. And
Okay.
he has worked from home since COVID, so about 5 years. And
Okay.
recently his father passed away, and
Mm.
his mother came to live locally here. His sister lives
Okay.
not too far away. So instead of working from home at our home, he works from home at her home so he can be with
Oh.
her.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. Do you have any special memories about your children caring for each other? So this has been a real privilege to kind of bring some of those stories to, well, again, you are right here at the beginning of this special podcast, but even through the book and some of the early interviews, a lot of people who don't have larger, abundant families express surprise to hear the kinds of things that occur organically between our children. So I was curious if you have any memories of that.
Yeah, I have a few from when they're little, and a couple from when they're a little bit older. So one that I remember is my oldest son was 9, and he came to me in secret, and he said, "Mom, I have a secret Valentine, but you can't tell anyone about it." And I said, "Okay, I won't tell anyone. Who's it for?" And he showed me, and it was for his sister. And so
Oh.
he was going to sneak it to her classroom at school and give it to her. And so Valentine's Day came the next day, and they came home from school, and I said, "Haven, did you get any secret special Valentines today?" And she said, "Mom, why didn't you tell me that I should make a Valentine for Dallin?" And I
Oh.
said, "Oh, I didn't tell him to do it. He just did it on his own." And so she ran, and she made a little secret Valentine, and she hid it in his room so that he would be surprised. And I just remember that being so endearing as they thought of each other, and their that celebration. Another one, when they were I think they were kindergarten and second grade, they were riding the bus together, and it was the second week of school. And Haven came home, and she said, "Most of the brothers and sisters sit together on the bus." And I thought that was so sweet that they would want, to be together, and that there were others
Yeah.
that wanted to also be with their siblings. So that was
Right.
really cute. And there's another time when same two kids, probably just because those are more ingrained in my memory, but he went outside and he wanted to knock off a wasp nest so that his sister wouldn't get stung. And
Oh.
he did that, and then he got stung
Oh.
multiple times, and he came in crying,
Oh.
and he said, "I'm just glad that Haven didn't get stung." And she was so sad that he was hurt that she ran and got his blanket and got him a drink and
Oh.
just took care of him. So a couple of sweet examples. And more recent ones, so I've got the 2 girls at home, and they have all these siblings that live away from home, and they love to talk on the phone with each other. And that is one of my favorite things, is to hear them excited to tell their news or to share their heartaches. And, one of my daughters really loves to babysit and help take care of their nieces and nephew. And the other one is so good with the babies. She just loves to hold the babies. And so that has been really endearing. And then the last one I'll share is I have a son that's a missionary. And when he left home to go for his training, we had, kind of this big, send off, and "we love you," and took him to the airport, and there he was off. But the training center is located next to where my other 3 boys go to school. They're all in college
Oh,
together. And
okay.
so they arranged among themselves to pick him up from the airport, take him out to lunch, and then take him to this training center and see him off. And it
Mm,
was just so heartwarming for me to know that he was
yeah.
also received on that end and sent off with love from his brothers.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It is heartwarming as a mom. And I can think recently of a time when my son, who is in the Navy, just joined the Navy, he had to drive to Charleston, where his naval base is. And I casually thanked his brother lives in Raleigh, which is on the way. And Nick, crashed with Greg and his wife, Mary. And I casually thanked Greg. I said, thanks for putting up Nick, on the way. He said, Mom, don't thank me. He's my brother. And I thought, well, I'm thanking you not because it's
Your job.
out of your, but yeah, because it warms my heart so much. It's almost like thank you for being that sort of son.
Yeah.
And just that it is such a gift to a mother to see her grown children taking care of each other that way.
Yeah.
Because we do sense, right? I mean, that they have each other and they will not have us forever. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really
I think so
beautiful.
too. It is a gift.
I am absolutely loving this stage of motherhood with these, young adult children. Young adult. I mean, they're adults.
Yeah.
They're not young adults anymore. They're really
Living their lives.
full-fledged, living their lives. That's so wonderful. Well, I guess this is the time where I ask you to say, why do you think people are so hesitant to have children and get married these days? Like, what is on your heart about that, and what worries you about that most?
I will say that this question is kind of tricky because I have a lot of people that I love who are in those circumstances, who are,
Yeah. Yeah.
choosing differently than I
Yeah.
have chosen, and
Yes. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of reasons. I think people are concerned about global resources. They're concerned about not
Yeah.
having enough time and attention for multiple children.
Yeah.
Money, I think, is a concern.
Right.
They have other goals, other things they want to
Yeah.
accomplish. But the way you asked it is really good. What's on my heart? And what really is on
Mm-hmm.
my heart is I feel like in our efforts to improve equality for women,
Mm-hmm.
we have conflated sameness with equality and felt like, both husband and wife should provide in the exact same way. They should care for the children in the home in the exact same way, and everything should be equal or the same. I think we were meant to be more complementary than that. So I'm at home now, but I haven't always been. I had some time when I was working too, and in that experience, I felt, well, okay, let me change. When I
Sure.
stopped working and came home, I had this renewed appreciation for the love and service that goes into my husband providing for me
Yeah.
and our family. And
Yeah.
in return, I feel a renewed sense of gratitude for the opportunity to serve him and our children at home. And in making that decision, I also felt an increased love for God, for his for what he wants for his daughters and his families. And I think there's joy
Yeah.
that we miss out on when we try to do it our own way.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point and a good one about sameness isn't the same as equality, or that equal dignity doesn't require sameness. Maybe that's the way to put it. One of the moms that I interviewed for the book, she had said something quite at the end of the interview, which I thought was interesting. She and her husband had both come out of a sort of an elite kind of graduate program in we'll say like a blue state with a lot of commitments to, a certain idea of equality. And they slowly came around to this vision of their marriage and their family as being open to more children than they had first thought, and she had first thought. And towards the end of the interview, she said, we were talking about their work arrangements. They both still worked. And she said, well, we both still work, and we sort of committed to the same idea as a partnership of equals. She said, but over time, as we've had more children, it's surprising how traditional our arrangements have started to look. And she said, not because we are committed to a traditional view of things, but rather that it works out better. It kind of just, it's like, it's the more easy way to do it. And she was getting at that sense that sort of, the complementary strengths kind of, they like water running downhill. It's like, instead of resisting it, it's easier to lean into it, sort of embrace that complementarity. And I thought about that a lot. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I feel like there's a tendency to be a little more competitive when we try to achieve this sameness, and pulling away from that, I felt more unity, more love, more gratitude in our relationship and in our home,
That's really interesting. I don't have it, again, I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but maybe I can get linked to it in the show notes. I know that research on mothers, wives, and mothers that Brad Wilcox from the University of Virginia has done has tended to point in that direction, that couples that are kind of trying to do the same thing in their marriage tend to self-report being a little bit, on average, less happy or less satisfied, both with the relationship and in themselves. And that I think it was called The Happiest Wives, the study, but that the thought was that, or the finding was more or less that the happiest wives were ones where there was a good sort of healthy degree of complementary partnership, but not necessarily complete, full-on traditional, she never works, but sort of like a moderate degree of complementariness. I have to look it up and go remind myself what those findings were. But it sort of seems like it stands to reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of a quote that I just love. I can tell you the gist of it.
Sure.
And it is that, and it's not my quote, so that's why I'm not that
okay.
wise. But the quote says that we really should put whatever we do outside of the home in subjection to what we are trying to accomplish inside the home. And that's the thing that I think, that's the principle I think that can guide these decisions. It doesn't need to be all one way or all the other, but that we know where our priorities are, and we work together unitedly to keep that at the forefront.
Yeah. A lot of times young women and college-age women approach me and they say, well, I'm really sure I want to do X. And so, what should I do now to make sure that X is what happens when I get married? And oftentimes it's, I want to stay home with my kids, or I want to work at such and such a place. I mean, so it's something like, and I always look at them like, you can't plan to do X right now. You don't even have a husband yet. So kind of orient them to the idea that the plans you have for your marriage have to be subordinated to the good of your marriage. And you don't know yet what will best serve your husband, how your husband will be looking to serve you, how you will together look to serve your children best. And there are an infinite number of ways in which you and your husband may look at each other and realize, oh, this is what we need right now. We need both of us to be working. We need one of us not to be working. Or this child needs such and such. You can't work all that out in advance. So, I always tell them, look, if you're not married yet, you're not even dating anybody, do all the things that are great to do before you get married, and get as much education as you're passionate about, and work on the skills you'd like to have as a mom. I wish I knew how to cook well before I got married, but I never really learned that well. And I said, it's like really hard to learn to cook when you're holding a baby.
It's hard.
You can do it, but it's much better to know. So anyway, but yeah, I really agree with you. There's not one way, and the good of the marriage and the good of the family has got to be the thing towards which all the other tasks, ideals, and dreams kind of work together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just really, One thing I struggled with a little bit when I stopped working was this kind of identity. What, who was I going to be from now on if I don't have little kids at home? And you can't really say like I'm a mom at home. Or you
Yeah.
can, but not,
Yeah.
what if there's no little kids there?
Yeah.
And I just think that it's really meaningful to serve, and
Yeah.
that's a happy, good thing to focus on. And I think we have a narrative that minimizes the work that goes into family life, and everybody has it. Everybody has dishes to do and food to make and
Right.
vacuuming to be done and laundry, But if nobody does it, it just is. It's
Yeah.
stressful. It is, it doesn't
Yeah.
lend itself to a happy home life. And so
Right.
I just am really trying to embrace those things as joy, and
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll always be this way. There's lots of opportunities and time to make choices, but
Yeah.
it's a happy way to be.
What did you do when you were working?
I graduated in business, and so I worked as an office manager at one company, and then I switched over and worked from home for an editing company and did
Okay.
marketing and payroll and customer support. So,
That's great.
yeah.
Why do you think people chafe at the feeling that they're serving, right? Like you've used that language. It's a beautiful word, serve. But I do think it rubs us the wrong way sometimes. Like, well, I'm just your servant, it's like,
Yes.
or you hear this with the kids all the time in the house. They say, like, well, I'm not this, you're not the boss of me and I'm not the slave of you.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's something in us that's sort of, my husband, when he was a young man, didn't want children. When he was in college and high school. And he said, his impression was that, he would see people kind of walking around in the neighborhood with these little, what people used to call them prams, these strollers. And he said it always struck him as like they were little king tuts. These babies were in these little carriers, and here you had these adults going around like slaves, kind of pushing little kings in carriages. Now, nobody would have, laughed harder at the time to think he might go on to have 15 children. However, but what is that in us that, there's something in it's like, I don't want to be anybody's slave.
Yeah.
And that somehow service gets twisted in our minds really quickly into being slaves.
Or servitude, right? It's like
servitude,
a different
that's right.
way of looking at it, where you're
Yeah.
compelled.
Yeah. And what's the key to undoing that, to sort of seeing it? You said joy, seeing your service as your joy.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
come from your faith?
You know-
Does that come from your faith?
I think too, sometimes we see obedience the same way as like
Oh, yeah.
something that's
There's a-
weak,
Yes.
but we know that that's not true, that obedience takes courage, it takes faith, it takes discipline. And so we choose to obey. And I think choosing to serve is the same thing. I think it is, it's, service and care that's freely given. And that
Yeah.
is a different way of looking at it than servitude or being a servant. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that, and you feel like that's rooted in your faith? I mean, that's what gives you that perspective or the ability to overcome that. Because I think, I don't know, even in our best days, like we have to overcome like an inertia not to serve, right?
Well, it's countercultural for sure. I feel like we're a very individualistic society that really focuses on, social media is kind of all about look at me and what have I accomplished? What have I done? And that's different than what have I given? Who have I helped? And I just don't think it's not built into the way society values things. But I think we have to just decide it doesn't matter and choose it because it's the right thing and because we know that it'll bring more joy than something a little more self-serving.
Yeah. So I asked you about kind of like what was on your heart about people not choosing to have children so much these days. But what gives you hope? I think that a lot of what I'm interested in opening up to people is sort of sources of hope and the kinds of things that, like, it's not all bad news, and there is a kind of good news about marriage and children. So what gives you hope? Like, you get up and you think, We're not doomed.
You know, I will say number one is my children. Like every day I feel like, you know, they're carrying on in this beautiful, faithful
Yeah.
way. And that is just inspiring to me. But second to that is I really love what you're doing. I feel like giving women an opportunity to say, this has been a powerful, happy thing in my life is,
Yeah.
I just don't know that it's been done before. I haven't seen
Yeah.
it.
I know. I know.
So,
I know.
you know, I do think that change happens quickly. You know, in one
Yeah.
generation, people don't
Yes.
have an example anymore of what life, you know, looked
Yeah.
like with more children or any virtue that kind of stops. And
Right.
the same thing can happen the other way around, is that we can make different
Yeah.
choices going forward, and our children and their children can be really impacted.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I'm quite optimistic that we can move the needle here through just sharing these stories and testimony. I think sometimes I think it's easy to be overwhelmed by the darkness, but we know that darkness will not overcome. And so we just have to pick up and keep going. So I know I'm really optimistic. I'm with you. I think my children and my children having children. Now here's a question for you before we close. And I was just I was a guest on someone else's podcast a couple hours ago, and he asked me, you know, why is it so hard for young people to find a spouse these days? And why don't they get married, you know, even in the first place? And there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but I just wanted to know, like, for your children who have gotten married, where did they meet their spouses, and what did you do to encourage the commitment to marriage?
They met their spouses at college, same as my husband and me.
Okay.
And I just think I think it's a commitment to virtue. I think that if you don't value virtue, then why get married?
Yeah.
You know, why what's different about that covenant relationship? And so I think being committed to that is kind of the impetus to have a marriage be really important and sacred and something that they are committed to and look forward to. And they have.
Yeah. The religious colleges, it's the hidden secret weapon. In a sense, it was the same for my children. Okay, last question. And then anything else you want to share, feel free. Last question. There's so much interest these days in kind of like what's going wrong with childhood. These, you know, anxious kids and all kinds of anxiety, again, trouble socializing, these sorts of things. What does it take for children to have a happy childhood?
I think it's kind of a two-part, maybe three-part question.
Okay.
The first I would say is just basic needs. We need to take care of them. You know, we need to make sure they're fed and clothed and sheltered and secure. The second part is all the rest that leads to happiness at home. You know, patience, compassion, love, respect, even work, teaching them to work, you know, laughter. I think providing those things is really important for a happy childhood. And then from a religious perspective, I would add, you know, prayer and faith, hope.
Right.
I think children need that.
That's great. Good answers. Anything else on your heart that you want to share? Kind of get on the record. The answer to the person who asked you why you had all those kids when you're out in public.
I talked to someone recently at a doctor's office, and she asked, "How many children do you have?" And I told her, and she said, "Wow, those are gifts from God." And I thought, no one has ever responded that way. Usually it's, you know, a little bit more negative, snarky even. But she was so happy and positive, and she said, I'm just afraid to have children. And I said, why? Why are you afraid? And she said, oh, they're so expensive, you know, and I remember going to meet with a financial advisor, and he was kind of walking us through our life insurance and, planning for the future. And when he found out how many children we had, he like plugged it into his algorithm, and, it comes out with this, exorbitant number of dollars that you need for college, and mostly college. It was so interesting because, so then he said, well, what's your plan, with your children? And so we kind of talked it through, and he's like, okay, let's just put that aside. And it's interesting because without that, like if we had had 0 children or 1 or 2, it would have been a really important part of that conversation. He would have felt like he needed to warn us, like, this is how much it's going to be. You need to plan for it. But I think he felt like no one can do this. So let's don't even, mention that. But what I wanted to say, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I heard this quote several years ago, and it was, we don't have children with money. We have children with faith. And I know that that is true because we've lived it, and we've had miracles in our lives as we have provided for these children. And, when we participate in the work of creation, I really believe we're partners with God in that, and He will not leave us alone. And so when we have needs, He's there. And we've seen that in our life. And so to those who are feeling like, financially it's not feasible, I would say that with God you can do it, and you'll have joy in the process.
That's beautiful. Amber, thank you so much. Those are great. I don't even want to speak. Those are such great words to end with.
Oh.
And thank you for all of your sharing, opening your heart and telling us about all those things that they're mysterious and deep inside of us and hard to talk about. But I think that's where this gospel is coming from today, that because the world shows us the other side so easily, so readily. So our children and our children's children need to see what's hidden, the mystery and the beauty of what's hidden. So thank you so much. I hope someday I'll meet you in person across from one shore to the other.
I hope so too. Come to Oregon.
All right, I will. Promise I will someday.